So while Shadows of Innistrad had a lot of really wacky things that happened, including the ultimate disintegration of Avacyn, this set has some pretty ridiculous stuff as well. And well, I guess we'll kick it off with I wouldn't say the biggest elephant in the room, but it's definitely something that made a lot of people really angry, and it kind of made me a little hollow inside as well. For starters, let's talk about the mythic rare, Gisela the Broken Blade. In case you are new, Gisela was actually a legend that appeared in the original Innistrad, and now for some reason she's a lot less colorful and, well, arguably not as cool. Although this version of the legend is, well, a lot less exciting as it doesn't have as many abilities or static abilities or whatever you want to call them on the card, it is a very playable card. It has First Strike and Lifelink, which will really help you out in combat, and it's very playable actually. For 4 mana, this is a very good deal. However, while the card is really powerful, it's kind of debatable whether or not it will see modern play, as it only has 3 toughness and easily dies to a lightning bolt. In addition to Gisela, Bruna has also returned as well, this time in the form of Bruna the Fading Light. While Bruna is a lot more expensive than Gisela is, she kind of works in synergy with her, as if your Gisela did die to a lightning bolt, you can bring her back with Bruna's ability. Now, if you think recreating not 1, but 2 iconic legends from the Innistrad block wasn't enough, how about we just get rid of them entirely? And this is where the new meld mechanic comes in. You see, although it's not very common in the set, only about 3 cards have meld. Well, technically it's more because you need 2 pieces to meld things together. Gisela and Bruna make up one of the meld creatures of the set, and frankly, well, it's kind of ridiculous. In case you don't know how meld works, essentially you have to have both creatures with meld on the battlefield, and during a certain time period of the game, it will check to see if you have both the creatures on the field. If you do have them at that given time, you'll get a fusion monster. Wait, what? And for some reason, Wizards of the Coast thought it was a really good idea to meld Gisela and Bruna into, well, what the hell is this thing? I'm sorry, this is just kind of gross. I mean, you destroyed 2 really beloved legends from the original Innistrad block and you turn them into this? I mean, come on. I mean, don't get me wrong, this card's ridiculously powerful. If you're able to get this out, you can make a lot of decks really angry, considering a lot of decks just love to play efficient cards. But seriously, who wanted this? Really? I mean, come on. I mean, don't get me wrong. Oddly enough, I feel like this could potentially see constructed play. After all, Gisela is really playable due to her low converted mana cost and her plethora of abilities. Bruna, on the other hand, is not quite as playable, but at least it will give you some value late game if your Gisela or other creature had died. Bottom line is, I feel like this card will be valuable just because it's using a mechanic that more than likely will never return. Still, I feel like meld is a very gimmicky mechanic. I feel like there could have been a lot more creatures with it, but I feel like that's a video for another time. Let's continue with our review. So, Collected Company was a very popular card, and I guess someone at Wizards had the idea that Collected Company for Planeswalkers would be cool, so we got deployed the Gatewatch. Sadly, unlike Collected Company, who has a lot more targets, considering there's a lot more creatures with converted mana cost 3 or less in the game than there are Planeswalkers. Personally, I feel like this is more of a casual card, more for EDH or some just for fun kind of deck. Considering, in order to make this really be efficient, you need to run a lot of Planeswalkers. But don't get me wrong, I feel like if you bide your time and get to the point where you have the stability to get those Planeswalkers into play, then this card could potentially be, well, pretty devastating. Still, it's definitely not something you want to play in a high-level constructed format. At first glance, Sanctifier of the Souls may look like a pretty janky, ordinary creature, but then again, if you find a way to produce infinite creatures, or a lot of creatures within the span of the turn, this thing can be pretty menacing. It does cost 4 mana, so it will take a little while for you to get out, but even so, I mean, come on, if you find a way to generate all those creatures in one turn, then you got a pretty big threat. On top of that, it generates additional tokens, and I mean, considering there are lots of casual decks and EDH decks that love tokens, I'm sure this will find a home somewhere. Speaking of EDH decks that love equipment and auras, I think the perfect card has been made for you. Sigarda's Aid allows you to cast them as instants and allows you to essentially equip equipment for free when you cast them. I mean, I haven't really figured out a way this could be efficient in like a format like Standard or Modern or something like that, but I think there are a lot of uses for this in EDH. I mean, come on, playing a Sword of Feast and Famine or another one of its, I guess, counterparts and getting it on a creature for free at instant speed does seem pretty nice. Moving on to a mechanic that's nowhere near as gimmicky as Meld, Escalade seems like a really solid mechanic, as it basically gives you the option of getting a command-like spell for the cost of additional resources. Collected Effort is White's rare spell with Escalade, and frankly, it seems like quite a useful toolbox of a spell, giving you a plethora of effective modes that can be beneficial for several situations. Lust Alliance is the uncommon Escalade card, and personally I think it could see play in a variety of formats. Because of its versatility, it's very likely that it could be played just as often as Collected Efforts in white decks that could benefit from it. And seriously, both these cards are great. I would strongly recommend you getting some if you do play Standard. They're definitely going to have their uses. Although Languish is still very popular in Standard, Selfless Spirit just gives us another reason why board wipes should cost 4 mana. I mean, good grief. I mean, we thought things like Rootborn Defenses and Ready and Willing were really powerful, but this thing is just nuts. I mean, you get an evasive body that counters a board wipe for 2 mana, and it has 2 power to start. I mean, that's wonderful. I mean, I may not see that much play in Standard right now because of cards like Languish and similar things that give creatures -X/-X, but damn, I mean, come on, Wizards, print some 4 mana board wipes, or heck, this thing will probably still counter 4 mana board wipes. People really need to stop complaining so much about how good board wipes are when things like this exist. Although several things were mentioned about Thalia in the last sect, she got like a lieutenant and a bunch of, I think a few other fancy things in Shadows over Innistrad, she has returned to Eldritch Moon as a Heretic Cathar, for whatever the reason that is. Although I personally prefer the old Thalia a little more than this is still a very nice card. It basically taps all your opponent's creatures that come into play and makes their fetch lands a lot worse. It's kind of comical how bad they become once she's in play. My personal gripe is that I really wish Wizards would just stop reprinting cards of old legends, because it gets freaking confusing. I mean, come on, there's got to be new characters, or it could be like someone who replaced Thalia, or like someone could have come back as something, or there's just several different people. There's more people than this in Innistrad, and come on, it's going to get confusing over time. I mean, for Pete's sake, we have 7 different reiterations of Jace. Speaking of additional things Thalia got, she now has a crew of Lancers, which you can use to fetch her, and any other legendary creature that you may have in your library. Personally, I feel like this will be awesome in EDH, as you can basically get a nice efficient tutor for a big fat legendary creature that you just love. How flavorful it is that my knights from Innistrad can go fetch me my Elesh-Norn Grand Cenobite. That's tasty. My personal favorite white spell in the set is Providence, just because it acts a lot like a ley line, as you can get some benefit from it before the game even starts. Unfortunately, this probably won't see too much play in EDH, just because I don't think anyone's life total wants to drop from 40 to 26 before the game even starts. But still, I feel like this will be a nice card for Standard, or maybe even some other formats if you end up in a meta that has a lot of aggro decks, as, well, I mean, getting an additional 6 life before the game begins can probably shift the game in your favor quite a bit, although you will have one card that you can't play for quite a while, but when you do play it, it should be pretty detrimental to your opponent. Seriously, have we really come so far when we're really getting Journey to Nowhere on auras? That's pretty ridiculous. This might be kind of a test to see how far auras can be pushed, But honestly, even though auras are usually kind of gimpy unless they have something with protection or hexproof, still I feel like this is pretty powerful, and it is really pushed, even for 4 mana. I mean, wow. Wow, just wow. I wonder what they do next with it. Being a big fan of fogs myself, I'm a big fan of Repel the Abominable. This may just seem like any ordinary fog, which just prevents damage from non-human sources, but you have to keep in mind the keyword is sources, so you can actually counter your opponent's burn spells with this. Pretty sweet, if I dare say so myself. Courageous Ringleader, Courageous Outrider, is another pretty sweet card, as it's kind of very similar to the Ringleader cycle of the Apocalypse block, which gave you a lot of card advantage if you played a tribal deck. In this case, the tribal deck is humans, but sadly it doesn't provide as much card advantage. It only gets you a guaranteed 1 human if it's in the top 4 cards of your library. Still, this is a pretty big body for 4 mana, and getting an additional card off of it is still pretty sweet. Although it probably won't see too much play outside of Standard, I think it does have a lot of potential considering human decks are very popular. Speaking of other humans that very well might be very popular, we have Lone Outrider, which seems like it will get a lot of life and, will give you a lot more life if it transforms into, oh my gosh, what the heck is this thing? Nonetheless, this thing could probably see some play outside of Standard. I feel like this thing has quite a big home in the Soul Sisters deck, as it seems like that deck has kind of needed another big threat in addition to the other big threats that it has. And honestly, 3 life is not that hard for that deck to gain. For Standard, one thing that you can rely on to give you 3 life is Peace of Mind. This card, which is a reprint, will give you 3 life if you discard a card, so it's also a Madness Enabler. It's just too bad White doesn't have any Madness cards in this set, or this block for that matter. Moving on to the common corner, we really don't have that many things that really are that exciting. My personal favorite common in the set is the Ironclad Slayer. This is sort of like an Auramancer-like creature, except it's a bit more powerful, and it arguably punts down a more narrow selection of cards from your graveyard. But still, it's a really, really cool card, and I do think it can see some play in EDH, and possibly a constructed deck, maybe in Standard. Modern and anything higher is a little bit pushing it. Spectral Reserves may see play as a life gain card in token decks. Although 2 life really isn't that much, you also have to keep in mind that it probably gives you a kind of a bit more virtual life, considering the tokens it produces will hopefully block some creatures and prevent some damage. Throbian Standard Bearer is White's another attempt to get a Madness Enabler, but like I stated before, White has no Madness cards. If you can splice a color, then it might be really nice, as you will get tons and tons of soldiers. The thing that's a bit of a disappointment is it's not a Flag Bearer, and it should have the Flag Bearer text, which is basically, like I said before, Spellskite, but very, very bad, and only available in White. You do know that Revoke Existence is a thing, right? You could have reprinted that. It's flavorful.